I passed the x-ray inspection, and without putting anything back on, I turned on my heels with the intention of finding the nearest restroom and slowly dying there one squirt at a time. But that's not what happened. I turned to go and found myself staring at 3 armed agents who stopped me and asked if I would follow them. Why? What's the matter? I stammered, wincing slightly as the act of speech seemed to strain the tenuous and extremely fragile truce I had negotiated between my bowels and the tempest that raged within. I have to go to the bathroom right now, I pleaded. Just follow us, please, they said, leaving no room for argument. The other travelers clearing the security check stared with curiosity and revulsion at the spectacle unfolding before them, whispering amongst themselves and hurrying to pack their belongings to get as far away from me as possible. No doubt, assuming that the airport had been nabbed some sort of domestic terrorist. If I hadn't been feverishly trying to hold back the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, I likely would have died of shame. With each step I took towards the room that they ushered me into, I felt my legs would give away. I marveled at how strong the human will could be. Marveled at what was essentially patching a hole in the Hoover Dam with bubblegum could actually be sustained indefinitely. Maybe I would make it through this ordeal after all. The room they brought me into was an examination room. I had pretty much stopped registering details of my environment as consciousness closed off, all but the absolutely necessary functions: breathing, ability to walk. But I snapped back to reality when I heard the snap of rubber. The slow dawning of realization poked through my agony and stoic resolve.
Oh my God, dude. No way did they probe this, man.
Rubber gloves. Fuck, I need water. Sir, we are going to perform a cavity search on you. A young, fresh-faced agent stated in a firm but emotionless voice. His short-cropped blonde hair was immaculate, and for a crazy moment I wondered if he was an actor, and this was all some sort of a practical joke done to amuse bored kids watching YouTube. He must have taken my tortured silence for resistance, because he looked at me sharply and said, "Lower your pants and underwear, please," and faced the desk. Panic started to grip me in its icy grasp, and the sudden adrenaline threatened to destroy my sphincter's bulwarks and rend my anus in two. I inhaled sharply, and with a pained gasp, I doubled my efforts to clench my cheeks together. "Sir, please," I begged, deferring to this kid in an act of desperation. "I have to go to the bathroom. You can follow me into the stall if you need to, but I had some bad Haribo sugar-free gummy bears, and now I feel like," but they had stopped listening and smirked at each other. 2 of the other agents, a tall, dark-haired female and a shorter, balding, fat man, looked away from me, and I could see them shaking a little as they stifled their laughs. "Sir,"
Face the wall.
"Sir, face the wall, put your hands on the desk, and spread your cheeks."
What the?
The young agent
I was on
stated.
my phone this whole time.
The young
Why
agent,
do I come back to this?
a lopsided grin on his face. "But," I began to protest, and then a fresh shock of pain forced me to stop and lean on the table for support as an ungodly howling rose from my stomach. Something between the dying moans of a woolly mammoth and the sound of bubble wrap popping underwater. I exhaled shakily. My focus began to narrow as I rallied for the final battle. Shaking uncontrollably and sweat literally raining down onto the tabletop in front of me, I turned to face the wall and heard a meek, childlike voice pleading from somewhere in the room. "Please," it said, and then, "Please." From somewhere within me, my mind recognized that this sound had issued from me, although my consciousness had now begun to separate my body, and I held my breath and prayed to God for strength. He probably had some heroin or something up there that opened up. The female guard said, as part of me that hadn't escaped into the ether yet acknowledged that she was behind to my left. "Probably high as a kite. Look at him," she said. The shorter guard agreed with a snort off to my right. "Spread your cheeks," the young agent said, his voice directly behind me and lower than the other 2. "And bend over. Please God, please God, please God, please God," I whispered in a desperate, maniacal mantra, not even aware of my surroundings anymore. I felt like I was lost in an opium fog. What was the last word of that sentence? With half-snatched images and sound filtering through to create a nonsensical version of reality. Another volley of pain tore through me, and I involuntarily leaned forward over the desk. My focus completely narrowed now to a spot on the wall 2 feet in front of me, a curious imperfection in what seemed to be a whitewashed stone wall. It was a dark blotch about 5 millimeters long and shaped like a smiling bear, a yellow dancing bear. No, a green bear. No red. It was all the colors of the rainbow. My God, it was beautiful. Oh, fuck. I accidentally opened up PowerPoint. Hold up.
Are you just letting Drew sit in?
Oh yeah.
My God, it was beautiful. Just took something as simple as a slight breeze to trigger Armageddon. That's all. No trumpets, no fanfare, no fire raining from the heavens, no dogs and cats living together in harmony, no finger on the button, no prophet to predict it, no nothing. As I stared at the rainbow bear smiling and dancing in front of me, my mouth agape, drooling, eyes glazed and bloodshot, face coated with a sheen of sweat, I heard the softest sound, an exhalation from the young Asian behind me. And then at the same instant, the warm air of his breath feather across my butt cheeks. For just a moment, maybe less, maybe a split second, even a nanosecond, I felt the presence of God there with me in that room. As neurons began to misfire at a blinding rate, nerve ending bristled and muscles twitched reflexively. I stood on the brink with 1 foot hovering over the edge, and then, without taking a step, I found myself plummeting. With a sound like an extra large plastic ketchup bottle being run over by a Mack truck, my sphincter released. The pressure of the blast pushed me hard into the desk, and the legs of the desk screeched as they scraped across the floor. My body remained rigid for a moment, and I experienced a relief that can only be described as orgasmic in its purity. My eyes rolled back in my head, and my tongue lolled out of my head like a half R-worded dog, and I emitted a low, sustained groan that grew in pitch as the filthy torrent pushed its way out of my body. Tremors racked my body, and I must have looked like a fish out of water with an endless stream of shit firing out of my ass. Other sounds and sensations started to filter in now as my consciousness began to materialize once more. The muffled
Did you write this?
no.
Yes. Ilya wrote this.
Muffled scream of dungeon filled with prisoners near death radiated from my stomach. The rushing sound of liters of liquid trying to escape through an aperture too small to accommodate it all the same time. The omnipresent sound of chunky liquid splattering against a hard surface with great force. The high-pitched screaming of a woman's voice calling out to God. Another voice sobbing uncontrollably, imploring to make it stop. And my own ecstatic monotone wail. When my ordeal had eventually run its course, I was left panting for breath and wobbly-legged, half crying, half laughing with relief, barely lucid, and feeling as if I had birthed an elephant. My colon felt like someone had poured chili sauce all over it and then sent it a colony of fire ants to eat it. Through my sobs, I heard the sound of dripping, like when the sprinklers are eventually turned off after an office fire, or after a thunderstorm when the willow that overhangs a pond continues to rain down long after the sky has stopped. From behind me, the sobbing continued, and I heard someone trying to speak into a walkie-talkie, but nonsensical words were all that the man could speak, which sounded like the ravings of a lunatic. With great relief, I slowly pulled myself off the table, legs trembling, my stomach eliciting one last sound, a loud, prolonged gas bubbling that eerily resembled a pig orgasm.
How the fuck does he know what that sounds like?
I slowly turned my head to survey the devastation.
He's a weird motherfucker.
Instant. If I had a pencil or some other sharp object, I probably would have gouged my eyes out in revulsion. And the smell. The smell was enough to drive a man insane. It was the stench of rotten potatoes mixed with sulfur and ammonia, cooked in a broth of chicken feces, and left to age for 2 weeks in a yeasty stew at the bottom of a French outhouse. After half a whiff of this ghoulish brine, I immediately stopped breathing through my nose. But the taste was to remain in the back of my throat for months to come. The young agent had taken the brunt of the foul witch's brew, and at first I couldn't process what I was seeing. I thought somehow the young blonde kid had been spirited away and replaced by a brown golem or ATV rider that had spent the better part of the day driving through every mud puddle he could find after a torrential downpour. With some degree of compartmentalization, I came to understand that for some unfathomable reason, this kid hadn't moved or hadn't been able to move through the entire fecal deluge. He had weathered the entire assault head on like some sort of hero from Greek mythology. I'd given this poor schmuck a one-man shit bukkake that would make a Brazilian
Fuck.
pornographer retch with disgust, and he was still in the same position he must have been from the moment of first impact. I tried to comprehend how he must be feeling, what he must be going through psychologically, but it became evident very quickly that he had become very broken. No doubt, forced so deeply within himself once the fire hose has been turned on that there was little to no hope of him ever coming back from it. Certainly not without extensive psychotherapy or a lobotomy. I looked beyond his quivering, catatonic, crouched form to see a perfect outline of him cut out on the white wall behind him. Either side filled in with a dripping, opaque layer of alternately pulpy and runny fecal stew. I noticed two quivering masses at either extremes of the room and realized that they were the humanoid in form. Although the caterwauling that was coming from these broken creatures was just gibberish. And this was the tableau that was burnt into my mind's eyes for eternity. Needless to say, I missed my flight. In fact, the next week is a blur. I have vague recollections of an army of hazmat-clad figures looming through the brown landscape of this soiled room. The slopping sounds of rubber boats squelching in puddles of fetid detritus, uncontrollable wailing, and animal-like sound issuing from the mouths of creatures that had been traumatized beyond their capacity for being put back together. The complete loss of sensation from my waist down as I was rolled through the room on a waterproof gurney, its wheels struggling to surf on the top of the shit-soaked floor. I spent a week or so in the hospital enclosed in a well-ventilated, sealed room with suited doctors coming in on the hour to monitor my vital signs as they tried to rehydrate my body. That apparently expelled every available drop of water from my body that was possible to sustain life without for a short period of time. Although all of my clothes were incinerated in the hospital's crematorium, and the soiled bag of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears was never recovered. This is my story. It is inconceivable to think that this kind of product can be sold legally and misrepresented as food. I was lucky. I survived. But as for the families of the survivors and the survivors themselves, they will forever live with the trauma of the events that took place at the Pearson International Airport on that snowy day in April 2013. Holy fuck. The longest review I've ever read in my fucking